Welcome to r/AskReddit, in which we ask and we answer some of the most thought-provoking questions. In this particular section we have a bunch of fascinating stories that, to some extent, causes us to think that, man, you're an idiot. I told you so! Precisely, this is the topic that brings us together today. What's the best I told you so moment? Story number 1. I was idly bouncing an incredibly dull knife against my leg. When I say dull, I mean that it struggled to cut a banana. A friend happened to notice what I was doing and he said, "That's super dangerous." I shrugged and said, "Hey, it's too dull to even make it through my apron." I punctuated my point with another, harder bounce, stabbing myself in the leg. It turns out, a paring knife without an edge can still have a point, much as my friend did. Story number 2. In the late 80s, I worked for my mother-in-law as a regional manager of her business. I worked very long hours for $500 a week. At some point, I told her that I deserve a raise. She asked me how much I thought that I deserved, and I replied that she couldn't replace me for less than $1,000 a week. She responded that she was sure that she could, so I said, "Fine, show me." She had trouble finding someone and finally had to pay that $1,000, but after 2 weeks, he was totally incapable of doing what I did. So she had to split it into 2 regions and hire a second guy at $1,000 a week. After 6 months, she discovered that they teamed up to embezzle about $15,000. Of course, she never acknowledged to anyone, especially not me, that I was right and she fucked up badly. Story number 3. I told my ex that I was passing a kidney stone and I needed to go to the ER, to the urgent care section. She told me to suck it up and that it was just a bit of man flu. Despite the pain, my anger had me drive her and myself to the urgent care. I got a CT scan and have the doctor tell me that it was a 5mm kidney stone halfway to my bladder. The look on her face when he confirmed that I was right was worth the pain and agony. Story number 4. Family friend's truck was making a grinding noise from the brakes. I told him to drive something else to go hunting. I got a call the next day because he drove it 2 hours and then his brakes stopped working. He ended up needing calipers on top of the pads and rotors he would have originally needed. To this another person replies, "Who the fuck thinks to themselves, oh, there's a chance my brakes will stop working. I'll just keep driving." That's so bloody dumb. Story number 5. When I was 13 years old, I found out my brother was selling drugs out of my parents' house. He used to tell them he was giving away McDonald's coupons that he got from working the drive-thru. We live in a very nice neighborhood and I knew the influx of cars would attract police station. After asking him to stop several times, I finally caved and told my parents. I was literally in tears because I felt guilty snitching on him, but felt like I had no other choice because he was going to ruin his life. When I told my parents, they accused me of being jealous of him for having better grades in school, and they called me a liar. He was able to continue on for 2 years before finally getting caught. Our home was raided, and he was on the 5 o'clock news that evening. My mother watched and sobbed, and I couldn't help but say, "I told you so." What could have been an easy conversation ended in federal charges and several $100,000 in lawyer fees. And for anyone wondering how my brother is doing now, for which question I'm rather thankful, he's doing much better now. He went on to have a solid 10-year-old career in crime. My parents always bailed him out, so he never had to face the consequences of his actions. Over the last 3 years, or 4 years, he's gotten his act together, has his license back, has a good job, and just bought a house and a car. Somewhat of a happy ending. Story number 6. I was in fright. I delivered a pallet that was supposed to have 750 pieces. It looked a little short, so I asked the customer to count it. He refused 3 times after I'd explained to him, if it was short, they're going to deny your claim. He said don't worry, and I said okay. I noted it on the paperwork that he refused to count. He signed it. 2 weeks later, he called the customer service to report a shortage and make a claim. The customer service rep called me and asked if I remembered it. I said, yep, read the notes. She said, oh, he refused to count it. Claim denied. Thanks, goodbye. Lol. Story number 7. As a teacher, telling the head principal at my school that the way they were abusing the alternate assessment program to boost standardized test scores was not just a huge burden on teachers, but also illegal and likely to attract the scrutiny of the State Department of Education. He handed me a shitty assignment for the next year. I quit, and he ended up having to take that assignment, teaching 16 kids with emotional disorders across 3 different grade levels in one classroom. This happened for the first month and a half of the school year because they couldn't find anybody to take my place. I heard later that year that they came down hard on him for the scheme that he had concocted and ended up shutting down the alternative assessment program altogether. I told you so, director. Story number 8. My roommate at the time always refused to take his keys whenever he left the house, despite me telling him not to do that. Relying on the fact that I always had mine, our shifts ended around the same time, so we would usually come home together. One day whilst we were both out, I had to go back to my parents' house, which was a couple hours away. As I was pulling up to their drive, I get a call from him, stranded in the rain, outside our place without his keys. I told him that I wouldn't be returning until tomorrow and that there was nothing I could do. He ended up staying over at one of our friends' houses, but since then he's never left the house without his keys. Story number 9. So I used to work in this particular place who I rather not say, and I had this particular boss who I was not really fond of. There was a vehicle he wanted to sell. He had this interaction with this person, and this person wanted to make payments on it. I used private party. However, this person wanted to take possession when they made the first payment. As soon as he does it, it's done. I told him that this was a terrible idea. I told him not to do this because it wouldn't be a good idea in the long run. I said it was almost certain that they will crash the car, and then they would just stop paying, and he'll be left with a damaged car and no money at all to his name. He told me that I was dumb and went ahead with this particular deal. I was like, alright, whatever you say about it. I was like, okay, whatever, you're the man. For a couple months things were good, and he was pretty satisfied and smug about it. Then he comes in one day and tells me to research what happens if the above scenario happens. And the car was in a tow yard collecting fees. He wanted to know if he was responsible for the fees. I didn't even look up. Yep, if you want the car back, you are. Story number 10. I had this particular accident when I was a young teenager. I fell down a bunch of stairs and I messed up my knee really badly. So badly that I had to have surgery on it. It was a day surgery, and when I came out of anesthesia, I found myself totally groggy and sick to my stomach. The attending nurse needed to get me up and ready to leave, but I just really didn't feel so well. So she's insisting that I sit up, and I'm protesting, saying that if I move, I will vomit. She made me sit up, telling me that I was not going to vomit. I promptly puked and threw up all over her.